Hello there, kids. Today we are going to talk about weathering, erosion, and deposition, or WED, WED for short. Okay. What is weathering? What is soil erosion? And how do these contribute to shaping Earth's surface? Okay. So if you notice, no, parang would you even think how do you think these things look like 100, 1,000, or a million years before? No? Kasi they are basically breaking down naturally rather than man-made. Okay. So weathering, rocks may be solid and hard, but over time they break into smaller pieces through the process called weathering. Okay? So weathering has something to do with the breaking down of rocks, not about the weather, if it's sunny, cloudy, rainy, stormy, or whatever and whatsoever. Okay? So weathering is a different term that has to deal with the breaking down of rocks. This process changes the size, form, or shape of rocks. So there are two types of weathering: physical or mechanical weathering, and the chemical weathering. Physical weathering, also known as mechanical weathering, is a breaking down of process without changing the chemical composition of rocks. Para bang it's quite similar to our past lesson about physical and chemical changes, no? Physical, if you're going to tear a paper, that's just physical because you're not changing the state of the paper. Unless if you burn it, that is now chemical change. Okay. Unloading basically refers to when the force underneath is pushing upwards. Ang nangyayari kasi nasisira yung surface. It breaks down slowly over time. We are not talking about days, okay? We're talking about years. It can be decades. It can be in terms of hundreds, thousands of, and millions of years. Freezing, or freeze and thaw, is basically, or in other words, is called frost action. Refers to when water basically seeps into cracks or fractures or of rocks. And when water freezes, you already know that when water freezes, it actually expands, no? And according to this information here, it expands about 9% in terms of volume, which means it becomes bigger, which is possible for water to break rocks or split rocks into two or several pieces. Okay? So frost action yan. So for example, in this case, uulan and then continuous yung pag-fill in sa crack. And if the temperature gets right, what happens if it actually freezes? Ito kasi dito, the illustration shows us that parang slow breakdown lang siya through just water alone. Okay, yung information kasi regarding freeze and thaw, freeze basically means tumitigas, and thaw basically means to melt. So another illustration, so for example, ito water seeps into cracks. Ang nangyayari dyan ngayon, once the water freezes, nagiging ice, it expands and basically breaks the rocks, no? Ganun yung process ng freeze and thaw. And the other one is basically root wedging. Refers to when plants tend to break through rocks. Madami talaga yan. Nakikita natin sa mga highway, you'll be able to see that there are plants growing through. There are small plants pero they can pass through rocks, no? Nagka-crack, break down, and just grow through. And the last one is temperature change. So thermal expansion yan. Just like when water freezes, it expands. When solid material heats up, it also expands at some point. Okay, causing it to crack open. Okay. Physical weathering or weathering can also be done by humans. Syempre, man-made. Chemical weathering. This occurs when chemicals in rain, moving water react to minerals and rocks that weaken them in some point or at some point. Okay, so this has something to do with the chemicals found in rain. Moving water, whatever there is in water, such as a reaction to possible oxygen, reaction with acid, reactions with organisms. Kasi nga, you already know that rocks, they basically have certain minerals in it. And with the help of water, so it can basically transfer yung mga minerals from one rock to another, which can basically affect the chemical composition of the rocks or the stones. So therefore, weakening the rocks. So through chemical weathering, parang easier na siya. When one rock is weak, it is then easier for the rock to break down. Okay. Build-up of acid. Okay, so yan mga chemicals. When it is mixed, what happens is that these rocks basically weakens. So compared to physical weathering, they break naturally. Although natural pa man din yung chemical weathering. It's just that there's something that happened that somehow weakened the rocks, okay, or the stones. Okay, that's for weathering. Now we are going to talk about erosion. Erosion is the washing away of weathered particles. So for example, ito. Breaking down, weathering happens here. Weathering happens here at some point. And once it falls, no, parang because of syempre rain, because of actually maraming factors kasi, maraming factors that basically affects or helps with erosion. In this case, it is being eroded and washed away by wind and water. So this wind and water are examples of factors of erosion. Basic factors of erosions are wind, sand dunes. Hindi nyo alam, millions of years ago, the sand dunes that we see now are not the same as how you see it, no? Iba siya dati. Yan, natural carving. If you notice yung mga lines, they are actually eroded through wind, with the power of wind over time. Okay, we're talking about it over time. Kasi dust particles, so may friction at some point, which actually leaves these carves, no, sa mga stones, sa walls. And another type of or basic factors of erosion, water. So water ang pinaka-common, basically yung that you will be able to see immediately. Washing away of weathered particles. So ito naman, second GIF is basically just a time lapse of high tide and low tide. Okay, pero at some point, syempre, washing away of particles din yan. Waves come in and go. Yan. So, washing away yan. Just the same point here. Yung mga particles that were present here are being washed away all throughout. If you notice this part here. So, ganun lang din yan. Second is ice or is referred to glaciers. No? So, they are also one example of erosion. Factors of erosion. And the other one is gravity. Pretty much everything. Wind, water, and ice. These three all happen because of gravity. Okay, so sa lahat, gravity talaga. Kumbaga yung main ingredient for all erosions. Gravity. Again, these are the four basic factors of erosions. Erosion, wind, water, ice, and gravity. Deposition. Ano nga ba ang deposition? The final output of eroded particles. So for example, yung sa mga river banks, no, if you'll be able to see river at the end of the river, this is what you call the delta. Ito. So in a better scale, in a better picture, photo. So this is actually called a delta, where eroded particles from rivers form. This is where they end up. No? So, technically, deposition refers to the final output of erosion through the process of erosion. Okay. So sila yung final output talaga. Just like this one. Of course, this forms over time din as well. Actually, in the next few years, in the next few decades, it will even either it will extend further or it will disappear depending on climate change. Aakyat ba yung tubig or hindi? So depende. So then again, deposition refers to the final output of erosion. So just to relate all three, weathering basically refers to the breaking down of rocks. Erosion refers to the moving of eroded of materials, yung weathered materials, from one point to another. For example, originally, let's say yung mga rocks natin is from this point here, here, and here. Because of erosion, so one cause of erosion is either wind, water, or even ice. And of course, with the help of gravity, they all move to a certain point where they will be deposited. So, forming something new, which ends up being the deposition of the entire process. Okay? So, yan lang po yung the basics of weathering, erosion, and deposition. Or in other words, WED. W-E-D. Okay? So, that's the relationship between all three.